This is a journey in search of wildlife in the man-made world of the city. It begins early on a spring morning in Regent's Park, where Londoners wake to the sounds of the jungle. It's only in London Zoo that you come face to face with those fierce and exotic animals from all over the world, which provide the classic image of wildlife. But there is, living amongst the animals in the zoo, wildlife which is neither tame nor captive. These are London's truly wild creatures, which have colonised the zoo. It's the survival and behaviour of these creatures, like the grey squirrel and the magpie, that City Safari will explore. There are rich pickings in the zoo for the magpie and the squirrel. Both collect and store peanuts scattered by the public. The squirrel works busily to compete for this surfeit of food, but it's unaware that its efforts are in vain. The magpie waits for the squirrel to finish burying its hoard, then digs it up to store elsewhere. Though the food is unnatural, the behaviour of these animals is instinctive and wild. Squirrels and magpies are hardly noticed in the zoo, though their lives are often more interesting than those of the captive animals here. If you look around the zoo, you can find many other wild animals which have come to exploit it. The honking of the sea lions at feeding time is a dinner gong for wild grey herons. They stand alongside captive herons in an adjoining aviary as they wait their chance to steal a fish or two. Like many of the wild animals in the zoo, the herons are here for a free meal. They're scavenging food provided by man, and it's difficult to imagine how any wildlife could survive in town if it didn't feed in this way. The most successful town species, like the pigeon and the sparrow, do have a special ability to live off what man provides. Sparrows are amongst a handful of species which can live for much of the year on breadcrumbs and processed foods. They make use of man-made nesting materials too. But it's the pigeon which has a unique ability amongst town birds to live on junk food provided by the public. Growing chicks need a rich protein diet, and pigeons provide this by making in their crop a white, gooey substance called pigeon's milk. It's the ability to do this which is one of the secrets of the pigeon's success in town.
Lions spend a good deal of the day just sitting in the shade and doing nothing very much at all.
Most of the wildlife that has colonized the zoo can't, however, survive simply by scavenging food from man. Every year, a pair of moorhens nest in the lion enclosure. Their chicks need natural food, and the moorhens find this under the noses of both visitors to the zoo and the lions. Tiny insects make up much of the protein diet of the moorhen chicks. Though moorhens do scavenge to feed themselves, they find this natural food for their chicks in and around the lion's pool. They catch fish in the pool too, a miniature hunting scene under the lion's disdainful gaze. Mallard duck chicks also need natural insect food in their first weeks and search for it within a few feet of the lions. The lion's den is a rich hunting ground for these birds, a territory which they'll fight over fiercely if the duck goes too close to the moorhens. The private lives of these familiar wild creatures is as intriguing as that of any wildlife in the world. They may look tame, but they have to fight for survival in their struggle to exploit the natural resources of the city.
The zoo is now closing. Our visitors should leave immediately. If you want the 74 bus for Camden Town or Baker Street, pull out through the main gate or the north exit. But do not use the north exit if you have a pram or pushchair.
The grey herons which steal fish from the zoo might come from anywhere in London. Some nest only half a mile away, on an island in Regent's Park Lake. These young herons on the nest aren't fed only with scavenged food. The parents catch fish and frogs in the park too. Herons, like other wildlife in the capital, are dependent on vegetation, which is the basis of a food chain and provides them with places and material for nesting. The fact that much of the vegetation in town isn't wild but cultivated and landscaped, as in Hyde Park, doesn't mean it's worthless for wildlife. Creatures which feed on handouts from man do exceptionally well. But botanist Peter Moore reveals that food from his picnic hamper isn't the most important source of sustenance for wildlife here.
There are also other forms of energy here which are much more important in maintaining the whole basis of an ecosystem of its own. There is a natural system here which traps the sun without any need for human intervention. This type of ecosystem has its basis in green plants. These are the things which really trap the sun's energy and which pass that energy on to other animals in the system. Now we can best demonstrate this really by simply digging a bit of it up. Well, this grass which lines our royal forests over here in the London parks, it's not very exciting to look at it, but when we dig a hole in the ground and pull a chunk out, we find it's got a structure all of its own. Really, it's not so very different from a tropical rainforest. because when we look at its canopy, it's constructed on the same basic lines. The green canopy of grass blades traps the sun's energy and converts it into sugars and starch which insects, like spittlebugs, can eat. Down below the canopy, dead leaves are eaten by woodlice and beetles. Predators, like the wolf spider, hunt small insects. So, under your feet in the royal parks, you have a miniature jungle, an ecosystem which produces natural food.
Even birds like starlings, which do scavenge, spend much of their time searching the Hyde Park turf for grubs. But some birds here rely entirely on natural food. These are long-tailed tits, feeding their young with a constant supply of grubs and keeping the nest clean by removing the chicks' droppings. Without insect food, they couldn't survive in central London. The Serpentine is also a breeding ground for insects, which attract migrant birds all the way from Africa. These birds, like the swallow, travel thousands of miles, crossing the Sahara Desert to breed each summer in Europe. Many stop to feed in Hyde Park. There are swifts and house martins, hawking insects on the Serpentine throughout the summer. A colony of house martins stays to nest here in central London. Using their beaks as trowels, they collect mud for their nests from pools at the end of the lake. Then they fly across the park to the French embassy, where they build their nests in the stucco rosettes under the eaves. In this way, the martins exploit the natural world and mold it into the fabric of the city. Most wildlife exploits the natural ecosystem of the town. House sparrows try to feed their young on natural food, picking insects from the trees in Hyde Park. Whatever they're feeding on, sparrows are themselves always in danger of becoming a natural meal. At the top of the food chain in London is the kestrel. Sparrows make up a large part of its diet in central areas. In the peculiar ecosystem of the city, the sparrow turns popcorn into protein for the kestrel. It's only because there's a natural ecosystem at work in the city that a variety of wildlife has been able to move in.
Yeah, over that way,
right,
yeah.
okay, yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
then, oh, hang on.
There's no end of rabbit holes there,
Oh,
look.
no, it's packed with them, and that's why the grass is really short.
Yeah,
and grey, isn't it?
it's absolutely packed with the little
It's
devils.
a superb little spot.
Some animals, like rabbits, are everywhere. But others need special kinds of habitat.
Are you
Yeah,
looking
it's a
on
slightly
that?
rattling noise. I can't quite
Yeah.
see it yet, but
Are you looking on that grassy bit again,
Well,
or further along?
in this area, you see from left of the triangle sign, this sort of open
The
grass
remarkable
area.
range of semi-natural habitats in London has been surveyed by a team from the London Wildlife Trust.
Right, and there's some open ground. It's
Yeah.
not all.
Tony Hare was a botanical expert on the survey, which was led by David Stubbs.
More than foreground. I'm sure I heard one somewhere. Hello, there's a magpie down there.
In this area, just north of Wormwood Scrubs, they found a range of habitats, exploring first some overgrown allotments by the Great Western Railway.
Well, here's a nice surprise in industrial West London, a kind of urban heath. There's tall grassland here and rabbit-grazed grassland. The rabbits probably help turn this into a heath and keep the grass very short by constant grazing, so the trees never really get going.
You'd expect to find species of birds here that like the low-growing shrubs and bushes of the heathland. There's one, that's a linnet, and that's not at all a woodland bird. That mostly eats seeds and it nests in the gorse and bramble bushes. Hello. And here's another typical heathland specialist. It's a reptile. This is a common lizard, which normally lies up under old bits of wood and metal. These lizards are cold-blooded, so they need the open ground to soak up the sun. They also live on insects and grubs and other things like that. And in London, they're a rare find. You only get them because you've got these heathy-like places. OK, my friend, let's put you back then. Off you go.
Well, we're just the other side of the railway tracks from Scrubs Wood now, and this is the Grand Union Canal. Clean, fresh water, full of fish, and with a very different community of species.
What we found on the survey was that London has this amazing variety of habitats in such a small area. Often more variety, in fact, than you'd expect to get in the countryside.
That's right, and we're just coming up to another habitat, very typical of London again. This is an overgrown cemetery. You always get a lot of woodland plants and animals in this sort of place, and there's usually some nice little surprises. This is bugle growing on a gravestone, and it's much more typical of woods out in the country than here.
It's really because you've got this great variety of habitats that you have such a range of wildlife in London. Of course, there are still lots of scavengers, like the rats in this cemetery. But you've also got a wilder world here, and that depends on these islands of greenery throughout the city.
It's these green islands which allow wildlife from the countryside to move into the city. And the kind of wildlife that can be found here changes with the seasons, as it does in the countryside.
Is it calling?
Yeah, I've seen him. Probably breeding over there. This is a rubbish dump full of rats.
Oh, great.
Come on, show you.
Yeah. Well, rats and then lunch, I reckon, or both at once.
With the first frosts of autumn, the abundant food supply of green plants and insects comes to an end. Many insect-eating birds leave the city and fly south. House martins, swifts and swallows begin their return to southern Africa. But in winter, when food is hard to come by everywhere, the natural resources of the capital draw in new migrants. A short-eared owl catches a vole on Rainham Marsh in East London. These owls, which hunt by day, spend the harshest months of winter here and on other wasteland in industrial London. Other birds of prey, like the kestrel, seek out the rough grasslands of London as a winter hunting ground. But it's the fresh water of the capital which is its greatest resource for wildlife in winter. At places like Walthamstow, water remains unfrozen on the reservoirs when country lakes are covered in ice. Wild duck, like this party of widgeon flying in over the rooftops, gather in their thousands on the reservoir. Coots and wild duck breed all over Europe, and some of these birds have travelled hundreds of miles from their northern nesting grounds. Resident herons gather here, attracted not only by the open water, but by the fish in the reservoir. A dunlin feeds on shrimps. The fish in the reservoir also attract cormorants. These birds nest on the coast, but in recent years, large numbers have taken to wintering in London. Some fish on the Thames then join enormous roosts on the reservoir and turn an island tree into a black chandelier. It's the natural resources of the city, like the reservoirs, which, in both summer and winter, attract a rich and exciting variety of wildlife to London. Here, a resident pair of mute swans give a cold reception to a family of Buick swans, which have been driven by the hard weather to the canal at Walthamstow, all the way from their breeding grounds in Siberia.